You're watching the Lancaster County Democrats Watchful Citizen Show. Our guest today is Tami Soper, who's running for Legislative District 21 State Senator. And my name is Barbara Baier. Well, let's follow up a little bit on state aid. State aid is made up of income tax and sales tax. So do you feel as though that is a fair way of funding education then?
I think having a mix of all of those tax resources is a good way to fund it, as opposed to having an over-dependence on just one resource, which is our property taxes. But again, I think that we really need to have an opportunity to sit down, look at the formula, tear it apart, and think about how we can fund education based on the need, as opposed to splitting up what we've got. And I think that comes from having a nonprofit background and being in those positions where programs are not easy to fund, but you have to start from the beginning and develop your budget the way it needs to be funded in order to address the concerns of the folks that you're working with, and then go out and seek the support to make that happen. We've kind of done it backwards with our education funding in the state, and I think our schools have suffered. The other thing I think in terms of education that we need to stop doing is putting unfunded mandates on our school system.
Hear, hear.
We continually expect more and more and more from our schools without thinking, okay, perhaps if they were struggling to meet these needs with the money they had before, that they're going to be struggling if we continue to pile more things on top of them. So I think that we cannot continue to ask more for less of our school systems.
So how do you feel about some of the assessment strategies that are being discussed on the state level?
Boy, that's a tough subject. I think there needs to be some consistency. It's important to me that every child, whether they graduate from Raymond Central or whether they graduate from Malcolm High School or North Star High School, have the same education and that they're equally prepared to compete in our global environment. However, I think that we need to make sure that we're really doing a good job to respect local control. And again, that if we're going to say we're going to mandate some assessment tests, consistent assessment tests across the board, then we give schools what they need to be able to accomplish that.
One of the biggest problems with assessment is not connecting it to what's being taught in the classroom, and then forcing localities to go and adopt a uniform approach on teaching, and that sometimes doesn't work because each locality has different needs and populations. So then universal assessment becomes a very tricky business.
I think it's very similar to as I mentioned before, we sort of need to reevaluate the way we do things. I think sometimes we take a top-down approach.
I so agree.
And we need to really work from the bottom up and think, okay, if this is what we're teaching in classrooms, then this is what we need to be evaluating, and talk about building strong foundations and then adding building blocks on top of that for maximum achievement.
Well, and then when we look at transportation costs regarding particularly education, because in my opinion, if children are not arriving at school, then they're not getting educated.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I think that the changes in the way that we transport children to school, I know there's been lots of busing cutbacks, and I think that has affected some children's ability to get to and from school. Some children are in a position where their parents may not have reliable transportation to get them there. It may be a challenge. Or if parents are working, they may be able to get them in the morning on their way to work, but then getting them back after school is a challenge, so we're having to fill the gap with after-school programs. And again, it's one of those situations where in some respects we're shifting those costs from one area to another. If we're cutting them back in transportation, but we're having to provide additional supports for before and after school, are we really saving ourselves dollars, or are we just inconveniencing our families?
Oh, one of the biggest challenges is school districts live with a levy lid, of course, and we understand the reasons for that, and there are a lot of good reasons for that. But there is no room for us to be able to really levy for the needs of transportation like we can for the improvement of air quality and things of that nature. And so you butt up against a very limited, tight budget that has to focus on the classroom and then you don't have the money to be able to spend on transportation. It's a huge issue that keeps on going. Now, you know, we have seen in recent years a real decline in our state in participation of women and people of color, diversity, participation in our political process. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing that jumps to my mind is that the caucus experience that we just went through was very exciting. And one of the things that I liked most about that is that it brought out a diversity of people. It brought out young people. It brought out people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. It brought out women and men and folks from all different walks of life to participate in the process. And I think that's exciting. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue that momentum. But I think we're going to have to work for it. We do have to ensure that the people that are running for office, the people that are sitting in those seats and making those decisions, are reflective of some of those folks that are coming to the polls. Because that's part of the reason I think that people don't participate, is because they don't see themselves in the process.
And then, as a consequence, those needs aren't being addressed.
Absolutely.
Like the needs for perhaps affordable, accessible, safe childcare.